you please help me welcome up Linda Sarsour.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm sure Minnesota can do better than that. Assalamu alaikum. I am so honored and humbled to be here and grateful for all the hospitality of my Minnesota Muslim family, because we're all family here. And I got to meet so many amazing people. First of all, I'm nervous because I get to speak in front of Ansa tomorrow grade and my butterflies in my stomach. Okay, I got this. And I got to meet sisters from Women's March on Washington, Minnesota. Where are you at? Who went to the Women's March here? That's pretty good. And for those of you that didn't, you like really missed out. You wanted to, but for those that didn't, you missed out. Look, I'm gonna try to be inspirational, but I'm gonna try to also be and put you in a reality. Is that cool? Can I just speak truth because that's what I know how to do? Okay. So there's a few things that I want to say. You know, ever since November 9th, I've been really I started out being really devastated, and I'm sure a lot of people understand that type of feeling where for that moment you were kind of even feeling some despair. And then just a few days after that, I went from despair and devastation to outrage. And I'm just outraged every day. Every time I wake up in the morning, I'm grateful to God that I'm alive, but I'm just outraged at where we are as a country and as a community. And just a few days after the elections, I was on Facebook, and I saw on my timeline this event that was going to happen. And it was this women's event, and women were outraged, and women wanted to get together. And it started from a grandmother in Hawaii, actually, a white grandmother in Hawaii named Teresa Shook, this is what she wrote: "I think we should march." That's what she said. And the poor lady woke up in the morning, and like 10,000 people were like, "All right, where are we marching to? I'm ready to march." So look how powerful that was. It started with an individual who we don't even know what her original intention was behind it, but it was something that she felt she had to say publicly. And then I saw the page, so I'm there, you know me, I'm seeing too many people posting about this, I'm about to click on it. So I clicked on it, and I started reading the description, and it said something like, women's rights are human rights, and we will stand for, Mexican women, undocumented, something like that. And I was like, okay, I'm feeling that, I agree. But they didn't have Muslim women originally. So all I did was, I was just a regular, ordinary citizen on Facebook, and I went in, and I commented, and I said, "What a great effort. I hope that you can include Muslim women and Muslim communities," something like that. And then my comment goes viral. So be careful when you comment on things, because then you end up being the national co-chair of the Women's March on Washington. So many of you know me very well. I don't have a lot of extra time on my hands, and I really didn't have that much extra time to be organizing the largest protest in U.S. history. But then I had to thought about some things. And I said, you know what? Here's my opportunity. Here's my opportunity as a Muslim American Palestinian woman from Brooklyn, New York, to use this gathering of women to really center the communities that I came from. And it was an opportunity for me to tell a different story than the story that a lot of people know about our community, or the stereotypes that people are exposed to about Muslim women. And Muslim women, we're in two categories, right? We're oppressed and victims of violence, right? That's usually what people know about us. Or we're enablers of violence, right? We're the ones being recruited by ISIS or supporting terrorism, right? So we're in those two categories. And there's this big story in the middle where the majority of us lie across this world, in which people don't know much about who we are. And then people were talking about feminism as part of the Women's March, and I was thinking to myself, wow, how often we think feminism is a Western concept, right? That feminism is something that people have to teach me as a Muslim, because we know nothing about feminism. And using this as an opportunity to educate people about who Islam is and who Muslim women are. And that feminism, in fact, is very core to the religion that we follow every day. In fact, Islam is a religion that always uplifted women. And let's get something straight. Islam doesn't oppress women. Men oppress women. And sometimes and oftentimes they're Muslim men. So let's get that straight. I'm not trying to gloss over oppression, right, of Muslim women across this world, but the distinction here, it is not our religion that oppresses us, it's other Muslims who oppress us. So that's the distinction. So I said, okay, this is my opportunity to come in here to make sure that I am telling a true story of American Muslim women who are powerful, who are articulated, who are educated, people who play different roles in our community. We are professionals, we are moms, we are college professors, we are a whole bunch of things, right? And that's what I did. And I got to educate many women that I was working on the Women's March on Washington with, many women who, believe it or not, never met Muslim women or probably saw us walking around the street but never stopped to have a conversation with us or never felt like they can come to our cubicle or talk to us on a college campus. And that was controversial, FYI. I'm like walking controversy. So the Women's March on Washington happens, and grateful to every organizer across this country. Because look, we could have said, hey, Women's March on Washington, and we could have ended up in Washington, D.C. all by ourselves, which would have been probably fun. But it was great that it ended up being the largest protest in U.S. history for a few reasons. Number one, it was led by women. Exclusively led by women. So hopefully somebody does it bigger than us one day. Maybe we will do it bigger than ourselves. But to be able to say that we are part of a story and a part of a moment in history where we can say that women organized the largest protest in U.S. history, women were able to resonate and organize with women across the globe, is something that we should all be proud of. That was number one. Number two is 3 of the 4 national co-chairs who really helped set the tone and helped to create the policy platform that you all saw were women of color. Tamika Mallory is African American. Carmen Perez is a Chicana Mexican. For people that don't understand when people say Chicana, that means the border crossed them, they didn't cross the border. At one point, Mexico was a much larger country. Myself, and I'm Palestinian Muslim American. So 3 of the 4 national co-chairs were women of color. And Bob Bland, who's the 4th national co-chair, is a white woman, a mom, a fashion entrepreneur in New York City. So even someone who wasn't herself an activist before the Women's March on Washington or didn't perceive herself to be an activist, and here she is as part of a historical moment to say, even as a fashion entrepreneur, as a mom who delivered a baby during the planning of the Women's March on Washington, was one of the national co-chairs of the largest protest in U.S. history. So the Women's March on Washington happens, and it happens in cities across America and cities across the country, across the globe, I mean. And it was beautiful. And it was inspiring. And when I think about it, it makes me emotional. When I was walking in Washington, D.C., as I left the stage and just talking to ordinary people, I watched women from Omaha, Nebraska talking to Muslim women that came from Michigan and places like Chicago. I watched women from Arizona Mexican women from Arizona talking to women from Idaho. I mean, the beautiful kind of sisterhood that was created at the Women's March on Washington really made it one of the best days of my life, and I was told by many people that it was the best day of their lives. So that day, for me, just made me so whole, and my heart was full, and I was very proud of the work of the women who organized the Women's March on Washington, and those sisters who sacrificed and did all this work to organize marches across this country, including in places like Minnesota. So that happened. Fabulous, right? It was fabulous? Okay. So we wake up on Monday. And on Monday, the very reasons why I chose to sacrifice my job and the work that I was already doing, time with my family, was exactly what I knew was going to happen on Monday. And every Islamophobe, and every right-wing blogger, every right-wing media outlet, every white supremacist in this country, every head of a Ku Klux Klan chapter. I don't even know what organizations or what was going on. But I did know that they were going to choose, right? Not the black woman, not the white woman, not the Chicana woman. They were going to choose the Muslim woman with the hijab that was on that stage on the Women's March on Washington. And they were going to defame me, and they were going to try to slander me, and they were going to engage in alternative facts and fake news, because, you know, that's what we do now. You know, that's just the thing to do. And immediately people in my community, in the Muslim community, were reaching out to me being like, I'm so sorry, Sister Linda, like, you know, this is really, see this, you know, this is what happens when, I was like, this is exactly what I want to happen. That's exactly what I was waiting to happen. You think I didn't know that I was going to be the one that is chosen by this type of people? I already knew that. And the reason why I took the risk of doing that is because I wanted to send a message across this country that was very simple. No matter what, I wake up every morning unapologetically Muslim. I wake up every morning unapologetically Palestinian. I will not allow anybody to silence me or intimidate me. And if you are going to tell me that I follow a violent religion, if you are going to tell me that I follow a religion that oppresses me, then you may not be the hypocrite that is trying to silence, intimidate, and oppress me. The irony in this situation. So I want you to know, and I wanted to start with that, and because I think it's an important message, that I have not been deterred. And in fact, that has made me bolder and braver than ever. I'm like, am I that much of a strain on your life? Am I that much a person who shatters every single stereotype that any white supremacist or right-wing person has about me or about Muslim women? And that I am not an anomaly, that I'm not just one Muslim woman that can do this, that I am one of millions of Muslim women across this country who are powerful, who are strong, who will stand in our power, and we will continue to do what we do. We will continue to protect the rights of our communities and our sister communities, no matter what any hater has to say. And that's the message that I want you to take from this today. So, if anybody was worrying about that, not worried. Now, here's where I'm worried. Now you want to know where I'm worried? Okay. Look, we are in a critical moment. And the reason why I'm here is because we need you now more than ever. Look, I'm in the mindset that I will respect the presidency, but I will not respect this president of the United States of America. I don't care what you tell me. I don't care what you want to say. I will not respect an administration that has won an election on the backs of black people, immigrants, women, Muslims. I'm just not going to do it. And I will not respect this presidency. So if you want to know where your sister is going to be for the next 4 years, I am going to be helping lead the opposition to this fascist regime. That's where I am. Find me there. Now, so immediately after Donald Trump became president, he started actually keeping his promises, believe it or not. All the things that he was saying during the campaign where everyone said, oh, it's just campaign rhetoric and he's just doing that for votes. No. Everything that he is saying is reality, and that is happening right now on our watch. So immediately when the travel ban was implemented, that basically banned Muslims from 7 Muslim majority countries, we didn't sit back. Women's March organizers across the country hit the airports with our partners from institutions. Attorneys, both private attorneys, attorneys that work for nonprofit organizations, hit those airports. And people yelled, let them in. The courts heard us. Some of the highest ranking officials at the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice heard us. And we were able to get an order to stay on that travel ban, which continues till this day. And we weren't going to let Donald Trump and his people get away with that. So we were the first people, the Muslim community, to file a lawsuit against the administration, citing First and Fifth Amendment. Basically, first of all, it's definitely unconstitutional if anyone still had any doubt in their minds. But also that the president himself said, well, maybe we'll take the Christian ones, but not the Muslims, which showed one preference over our religion, which is also unconstitutional. And then remember, a hero of mine, Sally Yates at the Department of Justice, was like, this is darn unconstitutional. And of course, she got fired after that. But hey, at least she got fired with some principles. That's very important. So the lawsuit is on behalf of about 17 people who are directly impacted by the ban. And if you look at the lawsuit, it says Jane Doe, John Doe. The reason why their names are not public is they are actually afraid of potential retaliation from the government. But the lawsuit is called Sarsour versus Trump. I put my name on that. People were like, you are getting death threats. You are getting attacked every single day, and you really want to do this? I was like, if they keep on, it's just going to get bigger than this. I want my name all over that. I want to go down in history as being the first to sue the first American fascist in the United States of America. That's my story. Now, so here's where the reality sets in. Oftentimes we are distracted by Donald Trump and his tweets and his rants and his lack of sophistication, and we're always seeing memes and people making fun of him. And that's fine. But I want you to understand the reality that we're in. This is code red alert is where we're at right now. People say, Linda, we gotta prevent fascism from coming to the United States. We can't, this is America. And I wanna just, FYI, fascism is already here. And I went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and I highly recommended it. It is a very humbling and emotional experience to understand the horrific things that have happened around the world to fellow sisters and brothers in humanity. But in fact, not forgetting that we as the United States of America sent back Jewish refugees in the 1930s and potentially sent people back to their death. Now, why do I say fascism is here? There's a sign in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and it says, early warning signs of fascism. I didn't write the sign. And the sign says, powerful and continuing nationalism, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government intertwined, corporate power protected, labor power suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, fraudulent elections. Is that not I don't know which one we haven't done yet or haven't put our foot in yet. When I saw that, it literally I just had a cold rush in my body. And I said, wow, in 2017, centuries later after the founding of the United States of America, which was supposedly founded on democracy and freedom of religion, right? Here we are in 2017 living under a fascist regime. Now, for me, we as a community, as a country, in order for us to move forward, and people say, how do we defeat fascism? Well, we gotta be rooted in the history of the country that we live in, right? I love the United States of America. My parents came here from living under military occupation in Palestine to find a better life. There are Somali refugees in our country who have lived for decades in war and conflict. There's rampant poverty. People have escaped horrible things that none of us can imagine or will ever experience, right? And we come here to the United States of America. And we're proud to be Americans, and a lot of our families say, God bless America for all the opportunities that it has provided immigrants for decades. And I love the country that I live in. But I also, just as I love my child who's not perfect, I have to be able to point out the things that are not perfect about my country. I have to point out the moments in the history of my country so that I vow not to repeat those things that generations allowed to happen before. And we have to be rooted in a history where when people say things like, we will never allow the things that Donald Trump says or his administration say to happen. And I say to people, well, what makes us think that horrible things won't happen again? We were a country founded on the extermination of indigenous people. We were a country founded on the enslavement of black people. We were a country that did ban a whole group of people from coming here by passing legislation like the Chinese Exclusion Act. We did that. We were a country that interned Japanese Americans and their children as young as toddlers on camps on this US soil. Segregation of races was the law of this land, right? That happened. That happened here in these United States of America, in the land of freedom and democracy. So when people say to me, don't worry, I say, people, why? Why can't I worry? Because what makes me as a Muslim American more honorable than black people, or what makes me more honorable than a Japanese American? That why would they skip over me? Why would I be immune to something horrible if we've done horrible things to people before us? I'm from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. I went to the Brooklyn Historical Society and I saw signs that said Irish need not apply. The demonization of Catholics. Like, we've done this many times to many communities. So people will say, whoo, Linda, that doesn't sound too optimistic. You don't sound as inspirational as people say that you are. And what made this past weekend even more of a reality that really like punched me in the back was it was the 75th anniversary of Executive Order 9066, which led to the internment of the Japanese. And an executive order means that it's not something that's passed in Congress. An executive order is at the hands of the President of the United States of America. And if I want to compare presidents, this president is way worse than any president we've ever had in history. I mean, people could argue Nixon, right? But this is Nixon times 1,000. So if something like internment camps can happen under a different president so many decades ago, and being able to remember that 75 years is actually not that long ago, that really gave me a punch in my back this past weekend. So, what makes me hopeful? What makes me do this work in the bleakness and the darkness that we see? And I tell people, not only is it important for us to know our history of the country that we live in, it's important to know our history. And in particular, our history as Muslim Americans. And what gives me strength and resilience as a Muslim American is that my lineage as a Muslim in this country goes back to before this country was even called the United States of America. And I've done a lot of research on Islam and being able to find, not my own story, but find the Muslim American story, is by reading and teaching my children about how in the 1500s, Turks and Moors, Muslims, galley slaves came here to the United States of America and built the first English colony. It was called Roanoke Colony on what we know now as the coast of North Carolina. When I think about enslaved Africans who were brought here to the United States of America in shackles, who were stripped of their families and their culture, and were forced to come to these lands. And 25 to 30% of these enslaved Africans were Muslims. And I always think to myself, how is it that enslaved people who have experienced torture, malnutrition, Muslim women who experienced rape, how is it that some of those Muslims that came still figured out how to stay connected to their deen? How did those enslaved Muslims still believe there was God? How do you still believe there's a God after that happens to you? After you come here in shackles, taken away from your children and families, how do you still believe, how do you still have faith and hope? And when I think about myself and about you in this room in 2017, that you can sit here and call yourself a Muslim, I want you to know, because centuries ago, people sacrificed for you to be Muslim in this room. So when I say to people, I want you to be unapologetically Muslim, it's not for any other reason but because you have a responsibility to carry on the legacy and the sacrifices of people before you, so you could be a Muslim right now in 2017. So that, my dear sisters and brothers, is what gives me inspiration. It gives me the resilience, because we will never, ever sacrifice the same that your Muslim ancestors sacrificed so they could be Muslim in this country. And then the many immigrant Muslim communities that came here and built our masajid and built our institutions and built the infrastructure for you to continue to practice your faith in this country, for you to be able to have the venues and the places for you to say, I'm part of a larger Muslim community that looks like this, that can wear hijab in this country. That this is not magic. This is because there were people that sacrificed their family time, they sacrificed their resources, their time to build that infrastructure for us to be Muslims in this country. So I want you not to take it for granted that you are a Muslim in this country. That not to give all ode to the law of the land, which we say is the land of religious freedom, but to remember that people sacrificed so you could be Muslim in this room today. And I always tell people in the Muslim community, and I oftentimes am at these conferences, and people will say, oh, we need to find a new, a narrative to tell about the Muslim community. We need to find that collective Muslim story. And I say to people, why? What new story are you trying to find? You just have to learn how to tell the story that is already yours. Oftentimes, our stories start with our own reference points. We think that Islam started when our Pakistani grandfather came here to go to medical school, or when our Palestinian grandfather came here, fleeing military occupation. That's part of the story. That's makes our story so diverse and beautiful, but in fact, your story started way long before any of our grandparents came to this country. And I always say to people that the story that we have as Muslims has already been etched in history. Your black Muslim sisters and brothers already have you as part of a long history of resilience and pride in this country. So I want you to own that. I want you to own this community that struggled in ways that you will never struggle for us to be here. Now, I say to people all the time that right now we're in a moment where there's a lot of conversations that are happening about Muslims without Muslims. I don't know about you, sisters. I don't like people talking about me without me. I don't like, people say, as a community, I always say this to folks, like, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And our community, as Muslims, we've been on the menu too long, for way too long. And I say to people all the time that we as a Muslim community not only have to be at the table, and Tamika Mallory always says this, I want to be at the center of the table. It's always like we have to fight for our space, and we always have to prove what our talents and what our skills are, what we have to offer. When we have offered this country everything, our blood, our sweat, we have come here as entrepreneurs. We have come here as enslaved people who have built this nation. Immigrants built this nation. Black enslaved people built this nation. And we need to be able to have that type of confidence in our body. So when someone tells me, and they do this, by the way, all the time, they always tell me, go back to your country. And I say, let me tell you something. My people have been here before your people ever got here, and we've been here before this land was even called the United States of America. So you go back to where you came from. And I think oftentimes, both as Muslims, but in particular as Muslim women, we're being taught to respond in a certain way. People say, oh, Sister Linda, but Islam is a religion of peace. Sister Linda, Islam is a religion of love. Of course Islam is a religion of peace, and you're not adding anything to the conversation. But what Muslims oftentimes leave out of that list of things that Islam is that our religion is a religion of justice. That is why I love Islam, that our religion is a religion of justice. So for me personally, you can't have peace without justice. So stop telling me about how Islam is a religion of peace, and in order for me to respond in a particular way, it's not even on a deep level. What they mean to say is, Sister Linda, don't respond in that way. We're a peaceful people. We're loving people. I say to people, no. I said, my religion tells me that I stand up for myself. I stand up for my dignity and my honor. I stand up to defend my religion. I stand up to defend the communities that I come from. I am told to stand up against any and all injustice. That's what moves me about my religion. The love, the compassion, the peace, the generosity, the kindness, that's part of it. But what moves me, what puts me out in these streets, what allows me to sacrifice my time, my life, and my family, is that my religion, first and foremost, tells me to stand up for the most oppressed and to stand up against tyrants and oppressors, and yes, including the President of these United States of America. Now, we as women have a lot of power, and our power is always underestimated. And we have challenges as women living in these United States of America, and also as Muslim women being part of Muslim communities. I'm not shy about that, sisters and brothers. I'm not ashamed. Patriarchy is not exclusive to Islam. Misogyny is not inclusive to Islam. Sisi, President of the United States of America. Like, we have a rapist, misogynist, sexist that is holding the highest office of this land. So we don't have to be ashamed about saying as Muslim women we have challenges within the Muslim community, because these challenges exist in corporate boardrooms across this country. We are still in a country that is trying to teach other people about human rights and women's rights when we don't pay women and men the same amount in these United States of America. I live in a country that doesn't offer me paid leave or maternity leave. I had to take disability to stay home and have a child and figure out how to still pay my rent in a place like New York City, in the United States of America, not in Saudi Arabia. And what I will say about this is the kind of important conversation that we need to be having in this country and leading here, is that when the opposition wants to attack our community, why is Saudi Arabia always the example? That's not my benchmark. Well, at least you get to drive in the United States. Oh, great, thanks. We get to drive. By the way, for the non-Muslim people in the room, you could pick up any holy book, any Quran, anywhere, translated in English, Urdu, Spanish. There's nowhere in our holy book that says women can't drive. Just want to make that clear. There were no cars back in the days when our beloved prophet introduced our religion to the world. And the reason why I say that, and I say that a little bit in jest, is because here as Muslim women, we're taught in these United States of America that just shut up and take what you get, right? That you got it better than Muslim women in other parts of the world. And I'm not going to settle for that. Because the reason why I live in one of the largest democracies in the world, the reason why I live in a country that talks about human rights and women's rights, is that I want to be able to live in a country that in fact fulfills all those promises that they have to their citizens, right? So don't tell me about what they're doing. I don't think it's right. And when I hear horrific stories that come out of places, in the Muslim world, I'm just as outraged as when I hear about women like Sandra Bland who are being killed in the custody of law enforcement. Like, when I hear about a undocumented woman who has been in this country for 22 years that has paid more taxes than the President of the United States of America, I'm outraged about that. What are we doing about that? When I'm in a country that talks about women's rights, but we're out here fighting for access to reproductive rights in the United States of America. When I'm asked as a Muslim, how could you be pro-choice? You're Muslim. I was like, Newsflash. Islam, in fact, is a pro-choice religion, believe it or not. Shocker, isn't it? Shocker, by the way, that Islam, in particular, is actually quite progressive when it comes to things like abortion. This is like facts. Even at the most conservative level of the Muslim community, the most conservative Muslims, at the basic level, they'll say that abortion is permissible if it puts the life of the mother in danger or the life of the child. And that is the most conservative level of the position that Islam holds on abortion. So when we have people telling us Islam is a backwards religion, Islam needs to be progressive, where are the, quote, moderate Muslims? This is what I want you to say. Islam is already a religion of moderation, and it is already a moderate religion, FYI. Islam is already a progressive religion. What you could say, just to clarify, is do we have backwards Muslims? Do we have Muslims who are not progressive? Do we have Muslims who are maybe not moderate? Absolutely. We sure do. But to make the distinction between the human beings who follow the religion versus the actual religion in itself is the dilemma that we have in this country as people continue to try to tell me about my religion when I'm the one that follows it. And I want to be very clear that one of the things that we are also pushed to do in the Muslim community, and this really bothers me on a very deep level, and I counter it in my own way, and it doesn't always fall right, is this idea that we as Muslims, in comparison to any other group, somehow we are the ones, right, that always have to condemn acts of terrorism, right? And I'll tell you why that's problematic, because people might say, so what's the problem to just condemn, don't you think it's horrible that innocent people get killed in terrorist attacks? It is really problematic. And I'm going to tell you to think about this in a different way. When someone is expecting us as Muslims to condemn acts of terror in the name of being Muslim in Islam, that very expectation is rooted in bigotry. Because when you're asking me that, you're not even giving me the benefit of the doubt that I actually somehow must lack the humanity. So I have to reaffirm to you that I am somehow a human being that is outraged and horrified by the murder of innocent people. Why is no one else asked? We had a white supremacist walk into a church and sat down for an hour in a Bible study class and killed 9 black parishioners. Did anybody ask Christians to stand up and condemn that in the name of Christianity? Right? We have right-wing Zionists who are murdering Palestinians. Do we ask all of Jews across the world to condemn that act? No. Because we give benefit of the doubt to our sisters and brothers in humanity that they too, in fact, think this is horrific. So I'm not even asking that we do that to other faith groups. I'm asking you to be in the position to say, don't do that to anybody. Give me the benefit of being a human being and understanding that I too follow a religion that believes that innocent people should not be murdered or killed in cold blood. And in fact, our religion is super clear about this. Killing one man is like killing all of mankind. That is our deen, that is our religion. So I want us as a Muslim community to start operating from a different mindset. And that is a mindset called organizing from a place of self-worth. We have worth, we are valuable, and we have to value our communities. We gotta value ourselves as women, which means that we do not allow people to put us on the defensive. We do not have to defend our humanity, sisters and brothers. Notice me in particular, and I fight with Muslims in the Muslim community about this all the time. People say, Sister Linda, why don't you do interfaith dialogue? Don't you think it's beneficial for us as Muslims to sit with Jews and Christians? Me personally, I don't think that's beneficial unless, and this is where you'll find me in the interfaith spaces, which is why you catch me in the synagogues and the churches. I don't want to sit in dialogue. I want to organize for social justice based on the tenets of Abrahamic faiths, and even organize with people who are Sikh, Hindu, Buddhist. So if my relationship to other faith communities is rooted in this idea that we together can uplift the most marginalized, center those that are the most oppressed, and use the values and principles of our religions, right, to engage in social justice and to stand up against injustice, that's when you'll find me in interfaith circles. You will never find me on a stage at a church saying, I too believe in God. I too love the same God that you love. And I also am a human being who has children and love my family too. I think that makes people, I feel small. That I am in a room explaining to sisters and brothers that I am just like you. That I was created by the same God as you. That I need to be treated with the same dignity and respect that you do. I think what is more valuable to me is to stand on a floor in a church and say, let us bring the values of our religions together. Let us stand up together based on being Christian, Muslim, Jew, Sikh, Buddhist, all the 99 other things that I could name here. I've met many faiths that I've never heard of. And now I know because I've met people that follow them. Where I can sit and say that our God that we all believe in is a big God, right? A big God, a very big God. Not a petty God that says we only stand for some creations of God and not others. That we all follow a big God and that we have the big enough, that God created us with hearts big enough and with minds big enough, right? That we can be loving enough and intellectual enough to say, Black Lives Matter, women's rights are human rights, that undocumented people are still our neighbors and deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, that our sisters and brothers in LGBTQIA community should be walking around in the streets and not fear that someone could murder them or hurt them just because of who they are, that we can stand up for our indigenous sisters and brothers, that we can make sure that they don't continue to be terrorized centuries later as we live on their land. Guess what? We could do all of that. We don't have to pick who we stand up for. And one of the most powerful things about the Women's March on Washington was the idea that we as women can bring everybody together. This wasn't a march about women only. It was led by women, but look where women led us. Women led us to this idea that in order for us to become a powerful force in this country, in order to us to create a human spirit that people have been waiting for a long time, that we get to teach people that we women can do all these things, that we can talk about religious freedom and women's reproductive rights, that we can talk about Black life and its worth in this country all at once. No one's message was diluted. Everybody felt heard. Everyone felt centered. Everyone felt loved and respected. And that's the kind of power that women have, whether within the Muslim community or all together with our sisters from across this country. So I am very optimistic. And I have seen the potential of what women do. And let me say this about the Women's March on Washington in particular. The Women's March on Washington was organized, so me, Tamika, and Carmen, we were organizers before. That's what we did, right? We were professional organizers. But 98% of the rest of them weren't. Bakers, yoga teachers, public school teachers, social workers, people who own small businesses, artists, you name it, we had them. And why was that important? Because oftentimes we are told that in order for you to do a particular thing, you got to be a particular thing, or you got to come from a particular profession. And the Women's March on Washington showed me the potential of ordinary women across this country. When I watched 500,000 people show up in Chicago, when I watched people in Los Angeles, when I watched Boston, I was expecting those. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, it's Boston. It's Los Angeles. It's Chicago. But when I saw Minnesota, and I saw Idaho, and I saw Iowa and Nebraska, I saw Mississippi and Alabama, I saw Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I saw Alaska. Sisters and brothers, I saw Nova Scotia. There was like 10 people. The power and potential that we had, bringing out over 3.5 million people within the United States and over 6 million people worldwide, stood with you as American women. They were like, even for God's sakes, if people across the world are in places like India and Pakistan and Nairobi, Kenya, being like, Lord, what is going on in the, like literally people are like, how did you all let that happen? I think we are in a moment right now. And I came here really to tell you this, that we need all hands on deck right now. And we are living under a fascist regime. And if you know anything about fascism, really bad things happen under fascism. And I want to share with you a quick story of a young Muslim male in a Muslim student association out in the Midwest. I went to do a lecture, and it was in a room a little bigger than this, and there was a lot of young people of color, some allies, and this kid stood up at the end of my lecture, and he was really passionate, and he said, Sister Linda, I want to ask you a question. He said, who lived in these United States of America at the time of Japanese internment camps? He said, I want to know who those people were. Who were the people that allowed for their Japanese neighbors and their children to be hauled off to camps on this U.S. soil? Who were those people? And I'm not going to lie to you. My breath, he took my breath away. Because I didn't expect that. And after he asked his question, he sat down. And the room was like silence. Not a peep. And we went on, and then a few days later, I was sitting in my office in Brooklyn, New York, and his voice came to me. And I heard him asking, who were those people? Who were those people? And it just kept coming back to me. And in that moment, I thought to myself, those were the silent majority. They weren't bad people. They weren't people who supported that, but they just didn't know what to do. They would rather have closed the blinds of their windows than for them to come and step out and intervene. And the reason why I bring that story up is because we just don't know. And I would rather be a country that is prepared than to be a country that is not prepared and for something really horrible to happen once again under our watch. So I'm going to ask you to do 4 things, because I feel like when people leave somewhere, they need tangible things to do. Sisters, we can't protect one another if we don't know one another, right? So I ask of you, when you go back home during the week, right? Maybe during the upcoming month, knock on your neighbor's door if you don't know them, right? Go down the street a couple of houses and say, hey, by the way, I've been living on the street for 15 years. This is my name. You know, if you ever need anything, I live at this address, right? If you live in an apartment complex, like down the hall from you, do you know people who live in your apartment complex? I will guarantee you, sisters and brothers, that even you, if you were to see a Central American family getting hauled off by ICE officers, and they were your neighbors, and your children played with their children, you would feel a lot more emboldened to stand up and come out of your house and say, what are you doing? Don't take this family, and be able to create some sort of buffer between those who are going to be the most directly impacted by this administration. So in order for us to protect one another, we have to know one another. That's the first thing. Very simple, anybody can do. Number 2, I need you to show up. Just like you showed up, and many of you showed up for the Women's March on Washington, and that was inspiring, and it was an opportunity to bring sisterhood together. When you hear in your local community that there is a woman who is about to be deported, that is not a threat to our society, that you show up for that community and that mom and for her children, and say, I am here and I'm standing in solidarity. When you hear that a black mother lost her child to police violence, I want you to show up for that mother. I want you to show up for that community. The power of us just showing up for one another. We have to understand that even our physical presence in those spaces is important, especially in the day and age that we are in today. And not only is it the right thing to do, it is the opportunity to see the reciprocation of that solidarity when people start showing up for us when we show up for them. Showing up is like the first step in activism. You don't have to be an expert activist. You don't have to know what's going on. You just have to feel compelled to come stand with people who are most directly impacted. Number 3, people will say, Linda, you're awesome, fabulous, but I'm not a full-time organizer. I'm a college student. I'm a full-time mom. I run a small business. I'm a professional. I work 50 hours a week. Like, give me something else that I can do to support the organizing work that is happening. And I say to you very simply, donate. Donate to the organizations that are trying to do this work, right? Support those in our community who are on the front lines. You know, like people like me and those that are running organizations like RISE, like we gotta feed our families too. We have to find means of support in order for us to do this work, to build those relationships, to show up in the spaces that we need to show up, to build strategy for our community, to train more young women in our community to be leaders, to ensure that more Muslim women have access to scholarship. Like this requires resources. $20. Commit to maybe being a donor where you give $20 a month to an organization that you love or an organization you wish you could do more work with. $20 goes a long way. Sisters, I was the fundraiser for the Women's March on Washington. And I raised over $4 million for the Women's March off of people who gave me $25 and $20 and $5 and grandmas that said, I'm sick and I can't, come to the march, but here's my $20, and I only get a $617 Social Security check every month, but she thought it was important for her to be part of a story by giving us that $20, right? So if that grandma can do that, I'm sure many of you in this room can do that. So donate. The 4th thing that I will say, this is very important because this is about us as individuals, right? Oftentimes, our biggest doubters, the biggest underestimators of ourselves is actually ourselves, right? I don't know. Could I do this? Should I do this? Why should I be on the mic? Why should I be organizing women's marches? Like, do I know what I'm doing? Am I the right person? You are always the right person. If you make that choice on that day, you are the right person. There is no time to decide whether you are the right person or not the right person. If you are compelled to do something, do it. Let me tell you, There is nothing wrong with failing, sisters and brothers. I have failed too many times. I'm going to write a book about failures, just so people can say, oh, if Sister Linda did all that and failed all those many times and she's still, then I could do this. There is nothing wrong with failure. Every time I have failed, in fact, if I've never failed, I may not be the person that I am today. Those failures educated me. They taught me lessons about myself and who I am. I have evolved on my positions by having conversations. I never thought of myself as a feminist until recently, talking to Muslim feminists and talking to other women of color and other women who are feminists. Like, there are a lot of things I have learned over the years. So never underestimate yourself, because the minute you do that and undervalue yourself and your contribution, then don't be surprised when other people undervalue you and underestimate you. Because if you're doing it to yourself, so what I'm saying to you is this: you got to love yourself. Don't let anyone tell you that loving yourself is egotistical or that you need to find humility. One thing that we do to each other in the Muslim community, and this bothers me, is when people say humility. Sisters need to show humility. They have a different understanding of humility. For me, humility is about understanding that the reason why I'm here today is because I stand on the shoulders of giant Muslim women and other women before me. That is humility, okay? Humility is understanding that I'm not here because I myself have and only what I bring to the table. It's because God gave me the skills, God gave me those tools and why I could do. That's humility. Understanding why you are who you are by understanding your lineage and where you come from and who you're really trying to impress in this world that we live in, right? But humility is not allowing other people to take credit for your work, okay? That is not humility. Humility is not about saying, okay, I'm going to let this guy do it. I'm just going to be the one in the back helping to organize the backstage. No, that is not humility, sisters. And if there's a brother, there might be a brother in here somewhere or outside. I get into that sisters and brothers thing. So I will end by saying this, that sometimes the only love that we have is the love that we show ourselves, and also as women, the love that we show each other. And one of the beautiful things about the Women's March on Washington, and it's not perfect, we have a lot of critics, right? We still have critics, sometimes from within our own networks, because we're still new and we're learning and we're developing relationships with one another, and we have different tactics and different strategies, right? But I think the most important thing is that we can have hard conversations as women with one another within our organizations, within our schools, within our communities. But at the end of it all, we have to love and uplift one another. We have too much external forces trying to tear us down. The last thing we need to do is join in and tear each other down. And when I want you to think about when you see something that a Muslim sister in our community has done, like when our sister Ilhan Omar became the first Somali American state legislator, and I saw her in her beautiful orange hijab with her, you know, doing her swearing in. I didn't say, why her? You know, oh, okay, now she's gonna think she's all it. No, I was in New York, I was crying for Ilhan. I was so proud from the deepest of my heart, right? When we have Muslim women who have started, you know, the first, you know, Muslim women magazines. We have Muslim women who are getting jobs in some of the most important roles and places in the world. When you want to be able to say that when one Muslim woman rises, we all rise. When one woman in any community rises in a place, guess what? She just opened that door just a little bit wider for the rest of us. So that's the kind of mentality that I want you to work in, and why men oftentimes are a lot more successful than we are, right? Because they don't care about this petty that we engage in. And this is, by the way, cyclical. This is not just something that's just happened now. This has been cyclical throughout history. That I ask you today to leave here in true sisterhood, right? And you are at an organization that is committed to building that sisterhood, to standing up for the rights of Muslims, to be able to portray the true spirit and the true contributions of Muslim women. And I want you to support Rise. I want you to, you know, it's almost like sometimes when we uplift a particular organization, we send a message, right? Wait a minute, why is the Muslim organization doing so well? Muslim women organization doing so well? Uh-oh, the Muslim women are rising, the Muslim women are at the front lines. That's exactly what we want. So if that's what you want, why wouldn't we support the organization that is their mission? So I hope that you leave here understanding that your $20, your $50 is going to go a long way. And I knew of the work of Rise all the way from New York City, right? So it wasn't a surprise to me when I got the invitation, like I never heard of Rise before. So that tells you a lot about this organization. So I want you to stay loud, stay proud, and I want you to commit to not being part of the silent majority. I'm not going to be part of the silent majority. And if something horrible is to happen, God forbid, and may God protect us all in this room, I want to be able to say that I did everything that I could to make sure that that didn't happen on my watch. And you do not want to be the people that young Muslim boy 40 years from now is going to be like, who was living in 2017? Who were those people that allowed these really horrible things to happen to undocumented people and to Muslims and to black people? Where were you? I do not want that child to ask that question about me, and I do not want him to ask that question about all of you. Assalamu alaikum.